time again for Speedrunners, where we gather some of that's why it's dedicated to all of the fastest gamers in the world, those that bend and break the rules of some of our most beloved games. Besides hunting down new world records, we also invited the Speedrunners to introduce us to a fascinating discipline of racing against the clock and each other. The most complex games on the scene. It's Super Metroid, but lucky for us, we have our guest today who is actually one of the best players in Super Metroid himself. It's Matt Thorne. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I mean, firstly, how are you feeling?
Feeling very good.
That's always a good start. We've given you a lot of praise. I do think it's well deserved, but I think it's actually time for people to get to know you a little bit better at home as well. So let's find out a little bit more about this man standing next to me.
I've been speedrunning Super Metroid for 5 years. I feel like I'm a bit of a kid at heart. I grew up playing these games and I never stopped enjoying them. Generally, I'll play about 5 or 6 times a week and I'll practice 2 to 4 hours before I actually try to attempt to beat the record. When you're on a record pace, it is definitely an adrenaline rush. I have the second best time in 80% right now, but I know it's improvable because one of my boss fights, I lost about 16 seconds alone just based on luck. So there's many things to improve. The competition is fierce for this game. I'm definitely not one to be satisfied with second place.
It's just impressive you're able to get through a whole game, let alone speedrun it in 40 odd minutes. Was there anything kind of up your sleeve that you're not telling anyone about, or we'll actually find out? So let's jump right into it. Matt has achieved the world record many times in Super Metroid, with his latest time coming in at 41 minutes and 58 seconds, only 2 seconds behind the world record. He'll attempt to break that record today.
We're coming up on the first major boss fight here. Phantoon has a lot of different random patterns that can determine whether your run goes well or not. Let's see what we get the first round. Okay, so we're not getting a fast pattern. You can get a fast, medium, or slow, and it's about 6 seconds between each pattern, so 12 total. This is slow. You want to get 10 missiles in Phantoon, and we did, so that's good. So we can get the correct second round in, we'll clear Phantoon in 2 rounds. Okay, we got a mid pattern. Nice. So that's a 2-round Phantoon. It's very difficult to pull off and pretty much needed for a world record these days.
So Matt, how important is that boss fight in particular for this run?
It's very important. If you can't get past that boss fight in a quick manner, then you have to reset. There's a lot of resets caused by that boss.
And resets are one of the worst nightmares for speedrunners, of course. You had a couple of attempts before you got to your main run. That's correct. They were all prior to the 8-minute mark. They were in this boss fight. How much luck's involved in this game, though? How much RNG is a factor?
There's a lot of RNG involved. A lot of it is the boss fights, but it's also drops, getting your ammunition the way you need it. That can be a big factor in the game.
Well, big factor in the game, but maybe you can pull it off. You already did it that one, and clearly you're very well practiced. Is Super Metroid one of these games that I could pick up and get through quite quickly, or would it take me a few hours to get through, or would I just die and go straight back to the start?
If you were playing for the first time, it'd probably take you about 6 to 8 hours.
Okay.
It's easy to learn, difficult to master, that kind of thing.
I don't know how to take about that. I feel like a good gamer. I think I could get through a little bit quicker, but maybe you're right, 6 to 8 hours, I'll have to try it out myself. I'm really looking forward to finding out more and, of course, seeing how you do in your run. But first, we're going to go for a very short break. Welcome back, and today on Speedrunners we're focusing on Super Metroid, a tough and complicated game, but luckily we have a guy with almost a PhD in Super Metroid. So Matt, why is it then that you actually chose to speedrun in general?
What kept me speedrunning is the camaraderie and the competition more than anything.
It definitely helps having the community behind you. I've seen that a lot throughout speedrunning. Why Super Metroid?
I'm a big fan of two-dimensional games. That's a big soft spot of mine. And it's a very complex game for it being as old as it is, so there's a lot of difficulty involved, and that makes it interesting.
Yeah. It is a very popular game in the speedrunning community. Maybe not as popular as Super Mario, but it's by far one of the most complex for a speedrunner. Super Metroid is a side-scrolling action-adventure game developed by Nintendo for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1994. The gameplay is classic side-scrolling, but what sets the game apart from other games of this era is the large open-ended world of rooms connected by doors and elevators, which can be kept track of in the auto map panel in the upper right corner. Samus can run, jump or crouch through these areas and can shoot enemies with her gun. The game is filled with power-ups that can either enhance Samus's armor and weaponry or grant her special abilities like the morphing ball, which, you guessed it, allows Samus to curl into a ball. Throughout the game, Samus has to fight several bosses, with the last boss being the mighty Mother Brain, which can take several minutes to fight before having to escape the exploding planet. Super Metroid's open-ended game design is ideal for speedrunners, as there are many different routes to go through the game. Throughout the years, the search for the fastest route has been one of the reasons why Super Metroid has stayed one of the most popular games to speedrun. In comparison to some of the other games I've seen speedrun, this takes a lot more of raw skill. There's not as many glitches. There's a few exploits, of course, but what you're doing comes down to a lot of memory and muscle memory. How on earth do you remember all these sequences for like a 40-minute speedrun?
Well, it's a lot like playing a piano or something like that. You just build up to it, and muscle memory kind of takes over in a lot of ways.
Would you say you mess up more because of how skillful the game is? Like, are there elements of the game where it's down to just button combinations, and if you even get the slightest little insy-bincy bit wrong, that's it. That's a reset. That's another attempt.
Yes, this game will never be as optimized as some of the simpler games, just because it's so difficult and complex to do your inputs.
How would you react to that then? Let's say you're on a pretty decent run, looking like you're going to get a world record, and then suddenly you mess up one of the easiest combinations. Is it controller across the room, or is it just no, I'm fine, I'm calm?
It just depends. Sometimes it is controller across the room. Sure.
I've seen it happen. And sometimes it happens to the best of us. There's a lot of slang or phrases throughout Super Metroid and speedrunning in general. Boss fights are very important in Super Metroid.
Correct.
Why so more than other games, do you think?
Well, Super Metroid has boss fights that are very, very, like each boss fight you need to approach in a different way. And so that's what makes it so important and so hard to learn.
It's always hard to learn these boss fights, and I noticed that there's a lot of kind of muscle memory that goes through these fights as well. It's very impressive, a skill that a lot of people would probably love to have. Is that something that you can kind of rub in the faces of your friends, the fact that you can rattle through these bosses like there's no tomorrow?
Well, some people were jealous, but I wouldn't say I, hold it against them.
That's always nice. That's a sign of a good heart. Hard strats is also something that's very apparent. What exactly are hard strats in Super Metroid?
Well, Super Metroid's a little different. There's not as many like frame-perfect inputs or glitches, but there are like very complex series of inputs, so you have to be using your hands in a lot of different ways in the game.
I did notice when you were doing your run, and actually I did bring a controller with me, because you held it in a very specific way. If you wouldn't mind just demonstrating, why is it you have to hold the controller in a different way?
Well, you just need to access the buttons in a comfortable way, so I'll go, like this is the easiest way I hold it.
Okay.
But sometimes I'll wrap my index finger around, and sometimes I'll even go like this with it. There's even one point where I turn it upside down like this. So there's a lot of different grips I use for the game.
Are the grips known as anything? Because I know there's like a clawing grip that I've seen in other video games. Would you call it anything in particular?
Yes, this would be the claw with the index finger here, and this would be the piano grip, and this would be the fat finger grip because you just straddle the controller with one finger.
It's decent to know. Maybe that'll help me improve my time. Okay, so there's a lot of splits as well in speedrunning in general, but of course Super Metroid, there are kind of levels or important fights that we've brought to apparent here. Which ones, or which one would you say is the most crucial when it comes down to achieving a world record?
Well, the Ridley boss fight is definitely something that can keep you from, or if you have a really good one, it can, help you get a world record.
And that's, obviously going to bring a lot of tension when you get to that point as well.
Absolutely.
Do you prepare for it in any way? Like, do you make sure you have a cup of tea nearby? Stressful, or...
No, there's no time for that.
Well, sometimes you've got to make time, though. And you have to make time in your speedruns as well. Which of these 5 would you say you practiced the most, then?
Probably Ridley and the areas surrounding Ridley. I practice a whole lot.
Well, we'll see how much all of this practice has actually paid off soon, because it's almost time to get back into the exclusive highlights from this man's thrilling record attempt right after this. Here on Speedrunners, I'm joined by Zosti, or Matt Thorne, and we are just about ready to dive back into the highlights from your run earlier today.
So I've been going at this fight for about 30 seconds. It didn't start quite as well as I wanted it to. In this fight, you have to be really careful, because normally your spacer shot is a blessing, being wider than your normal shot. But in this fight, a lot of times Ridley's tail will eat it, as you just saw. Ridley's tail likes to just eat those shots. You see us unloading our missiles and super missiles. They do more damage per second than the normal shots. So we try to fit those in at some point. Okay, Ridley's getting close to dead here. Okay, Ridley rose up, so we just gotta let him grab us, and the fight's done.
These boss fights are starting to look a little bit complicated for my liking. How many boss fights in total are there in Super Metroid?
There's 5 major boss fights.
And how important is it that you know all the weaknesses for these bosses then?
It's very important. You need to know their patterns and the way they move, and when you can damage them and all that stuff, for sure.
Which boss would you say you fear the most?
Oh, probably Ridley. Probably Ridley.
Is that just because of the failure that you've had against him, or the amount of failures, or was it just because he doesn't have as much weaknesses as the other bosses, for example?
Well, Ridley's AI is more complex probably than any other boss, so the movement is a little hard to predict sometimes, stuff like that.
Well, we'll see if the movement's easier to predict in this next highlight. It's actually the Dragon fight. Let's take a look.
Okay, this trick coming up is called the full halfie. You need a tight set of wall jumps going up this climb here, and you'll have just enough shine spark energy stored up, like just enough time to release it here in this dash across the room. The name full halfie is kind of funny, but the old trick only went through half the room. It was called the halfie, so that's why. So Dragon, you need to short charge in this room, and a well-timed X Factor does a little bit of additional damage. Now, I've gotten some bad RNG here. We had a lot of swoops. You don't want to see swoops in this fight, but we've cleared it.
So, not looking amazing at this point, but it's maybe still salvageable. We'll remain to see whether that can happen. How are you feeling then during the Dragon fight?
I'm feeling good. I've put together a pretty good-looking run, even though I've had a little bit of bad luck.
And if you could explain the Dragon fight in the nerdiest way possible, what kind of things do you have to remember to be able to defeat him?
Dragon's one of the only bosses you can defeat with shine sparks, and if you defeat Dragon the right way with a shine spark, you end up with a blue suit, which is a glitch in the game that allows you to get through the next room really quick.
That was pretty nerdy. I like that.
Yeah.
Made me feel good. Matt here is actually an icon in the community, and he has created a lot of the routes through the game, and he's set more records than anyone else. But one single player doesn't make a community. So how about we take a look at some of the other players who have set records in Super Metroid. The first recorded speedrun of Super Metroid was Smokey's 2004 run, which clocked in at 56 minutes and 22 seconds. In subsequent runs, he was able to lower his time down to 54 minutes. A few years later, legendary speedrunner Hotarubi beat Smokey's time with a 52-minute and 44-second run, which was so fast that many people thought the run was actually fake. Adding to the mystique, Hotarubi took time after defeating the Mother Brain to save the animals who were locked up in this room. This rescue mission makes no difference in the game, except the cutscene at the end, where you can see the animals animals as they escape the exploding planet. In the following years, Hotarubi repeatedly improved his time, with no other players even coming close to his record, which then stood at 49 minutes and 25 seconds. Finally, in 2012, Garrison beat Hotarubi by only 3 seconds, but not without chokes. A year passed in which Garrison and 2 other speedrunners, Cop Power and Zost, took turns lowering the record.
My heart's beating so hard.
Then, a new and somewhat secretive speedrunner, Behemoth, announced his presence loudly. He didn't stream on Twitch, and virtually no one in the speedrunning community knew him until he uploaded a record-breaking 45-minute, 22-second run. This method of playing offline and setting a surprise record is now known as Behemothing. Behemoth's offline record has since been beaten multiple times by Zost, Kotawa, and Behemoth himself. Today, the record is held by Oats and Goats at an astonishing 41 minutes and 58 seconds.
That's it, baby! That's it! Yeah! Woo-hoo-hoo!
There's a lot of icons in the Super Metroid community then, Matt. Any particular icon that you might look up to?
I'll have to go with Hotarubi. He's the one that got me into this game.
And what is it about Hotarubi that makes him such an icon?
Well, Hotarubi just was so far ahead of everybody else when he got his records in 2008 for this game. And he's an extremely well-known speedrunner outside of this game as well.
So a bit of a legend.
Definitely a speedrunning legend.
Do you think you'll be there one day? Do you think you'll be
I don't know if I can live up to that legacy.
We'll be making another TV series and they'll be like, oh man, Matt was just my jam. He's my boy. How good is Cut Power then? Because I understand you're a pretty big fan of this guy as well.
I'm a big fan of Cop Power. Cop Power is a very well-rounded player. He's had the record in a lot of different categories for this game.
And that always helps, being able to hold it in different categories as well, rather than just the one, because then people realise you are very good at the game in general. Is there anyone in the community that's kind of like shot through the ranks that was unexpected? Or is it, do you always notice the new players coming through?
You usually notice, with this day and age, people streaming, you usually see it coming.
Maybe I'll get to be a speedrunner one day.
Maybe.
You'll be like, I know that guy, I remember him. I guess we will need another break, although I'd rather actually just stay here and watch the highlights. But don't worry, we'll wait for you guys until we get back after this break. We're nearing the end of your run. Matt, we're finally getting there.
If you're going very fast, it becomes very difficult not to die.
We are back here on Speedrunners, and I'm joined by the godfather, or some might actually call him the grandfather of Super Metroid. It's Matt Thorne. Before the break, we saw you get past Dragon, and now it's time for another fight, this time against the Mother Brain.
So I'm coming up on the big Metroid skip here. It's always a tense moment in the game, because if you miss it, you lose like 30 seconds. So you basically need to jump rope the Metroid here. It follows your pathing, so you have to do like a very subtle series of jump roping, and a ball up and in there, and you clear it.
Does the game save if you die?
It does not. You get sent all the way back to about 1 minute and 30 seconds in the game.
How hard then is it not to die? Because some of those levels look a little bit tough.
If you're going very fast, it becomes very difficult not to die. If you push it faster and faster, there's more chance of dying.
So are you sometimes in a speed run that's going relatively well and you're reluctant to push it harder because you don't want to risk dying?
Not usually. Usually just keep pushing and hope not to die and try to do your best.
And you are a man who sets the pace, because you actually have found certain routes that will encourage others to get even faster runs. How does it feel when someone else uses the routes you found to set a world record?
Oh, it feels good. It feels good being a trailblazer, but, you know, sometimes I'm using other people's routes too, so it just goes both ways.
How many routes exactly have you found, or like roughly do you
Probably about 4 or 5 different ones in different categories.
That's a decent amount. That's certainly an impressive amount. We've had speedrunners who have never found a route or a glitch, so it's something that you can definitely be proud of. We're nearing the end of your run. Matt, we're finally getting there. So let's take a look at your final highlight of the day.
So I'm making my way through the escape here. There's a new trick that was just found recently, like in the last few weeks, called a moonfall. You'll see it right here. She'll fall way faster than she's supposed to. It has to do with moonwalking. If you moonwalk and then jump backwards in a specific way, then her downward speed will not be capped. You see a diagonal shine spark here up the shaft. You have to be careful with that one, or you might bonk onto a platform.
So we just about finished your run then, Matt. It was a run of 43 minutes and 55 seconds in the end. How satisfied are you with that?
I'm pretty satisfied. I'm just happy to get a completed run.
Definitely not dying.
Definitely not dying,
Yeah,
yes.
speaking about not dying, very important. You're a man who's set more world records than anyone in Super Metroid, which of course is already amazing to hold anyway. How annoying is it that you don't hold the world record anymore?
It's not too annoying. You know, it bothers me a little bit, but I know I can get it back, so yeah, I don't get too upset about it.
Where is it then that this world record can be improved upon? How much time can still be gained in Super Metroid?
Probably about 20 or 30 seconds. A lot of it comes down to getting a good run and the luck to line up together.
Do you think there are still more routes, more glitches that can still be found in Super Metroid?
I don't think you can ever rule out that possibility. There was a glitch found very recently within the last few weeks, so it would be very unwise to rule that out.
You will not get a faster gaming experience anywhere in the world than you get on this show. All other games will seem like snail pace after a dose of the best in the world at speedrunning. So make sure you tune in next time. We'll see you then.